Welcome to our women's panel. It's a good opportunity to bring together a group of our inspiring women who can take part in the work that we do. So as a youth development and outdoor learning charity, our focus is very much sailing is the medium, but youth development is the focus. Some of us have been in the circuit for a little bit longer than some others. But myself, I started with the Tall Ships Youth Trust in its previous form as Sail Training Association back about over 20 years ago. Sailing on the schooners that the organisation used to have, and then I've come back into the charity in the last 18 months to lead the youth development charge as it sits today. We're going to do some quick introductions and then we're going to bounce some questions around this.
Okay, thank you. Hi there, I'm Lucy. I started also sail training on larger sailing vessels sort of mid-90s, early 90s, mid-90s. Met Kirsty back then on board the schooners. Sailed for about 10 years full time as my job, and then I came shore based and was involved in sail training in a shore based role. I can talk a little bit more about that later on. And I still volunteer about 3 or 4 weeks every year on board various sailing vessels.
So I'm Charlotte. I'm one of the young ambassadors with Tall Ships. I'm also a volunteer with them. So I've been volunteering for about 6 years. And spent my school holidays on the boats.
I'm Jo, currently Chichester Harbour master, although very different from the path that I was on 30 years ago when I first went on to Winston Churchill as an engineer apprentice for Land Rover. I'm very much at the tail end of my career, hopefully my final job now, having had a very, very merchant navy career. Tall Ships really did change the focus and direction of my life. Growing up in the Midlands and going away on an offshore sailing ship for the first time was absolutely instrumental in where my future was gone. So I did complete my engineer apprenticeship, but then went away and did merchant navy cadetship. So my background is commercial rather than sail training based. So my merchant navy cadetship took me from cadet all the way through to captain and master mariner. Predominantly British Antarctic Survey for the first 12 years, working in one of the most amazing places on Earth, the Antarctic, on fascinating research vessels. It's been a few diversions along the route. I spent 3 years living and working on the sub-Antarctic island in South Georgia as government officer, which was Harbour Master's fisheries officer, a few other bits and pieces thrown in. And then had 4 years as captain on the Royal Research Ship Discovery, based out of Southampton. And then looking for a more shore-based role, ended up briefly captain on Red Funnel and the White Link while I was looking for Harbour Master's job. And that took me down to the Falklands for 2 years as Harbour Master down there. And then the dream job in the home port came up, which has brought me full circle to Chichester Harbour and the Harbour Master's role in Chichester that I've been doing just over 12 months still.
Being sailing since I was 5, but dinghy sailing, so Tall Ships is quite different from that. And then I sort of stopped because of COVID, and in 2022 I went on my first trip with Tall Ships. I was 14, and I really loved it. I just loved it and I wanted to come back, so I signed up for the next voyage a week later, and that was the last year, and I got a watch leader recommendation. We went to the Channel Islands. And then since then, I have done my watch leader training, and I've done 4 trips as a watch leader, and I've got another 4. So I've got my second year of A-levels starting in September. So over my summer holidays, I'm away most of the time, which is just fun. And I've also been to the International Maritime Organisation with Tall Ships for the Women's Day, and that was really interesting because it was loads of different people with maritime backgrounds talking about their experience.
Yeah, hi, I'm India. And I'm a little bit of a mix of backgrounds here. So I also started dinghy sailing. Dinghy sailing, pretty close to here actually, a lot in the Solent. And did my first trip with Tall Ships in 2017 with my school. Absolutely loved it. It was a week-long voyage, did a bit of chart work, learned about voyage, did all sorts, and it inspired me to go back. So I did a transatlantic crossing with the company, and then also did my watch leader course for my kitty. I loved it so much that I also went into the Merchant Navy, and I finished a 3-year-long Merchant Navy deck cadetship last year in January. So that took me all around the world on various ships, and again, loved it. And then more latterly, I went back into the sailing as opposed to being on ships, and just finished the Ocean Globe race here in Cowes, actually. Started in Cowes, finished in Cowes, but had quite a few miles in between. And then now I'm going back to work on ships.
You sound so joyous about that. Needless to say, the backgrounds of the people that we meet when we come through Tall Ships Use Trust, you get a whole mixture of beginnings. The journey is completely unique to each individual, and the long-term outcomes are quite spectacular. So what's really nice is obviously over the last 18 months in the role that I've had, I've been able to work with India, Kitty and Charlotte. And then in a longer sense, Joe's probably one of my longest standing friends, I think. We've known each other through Tall Ships since IC7, many years. And Lucy and I keep reminding Lucy every time we meet that back in 2000, it was January 2000, we were sitting at the deck of the Winston Churchill it was the end of a voyage, it was an adult voyage, with a bottle of red wine and plastic cups, and the 3 watch leaders sitting on the deck of the boat going, what on earth are we going to be doing with our lives? And 24 years later, we sort of think, we've done a lot. It's been amazing things on the journey. So each individual finding that spark, and actually is quite nice because everybody's talked about, something that sparked that journey. What I do want to dig a little bit deeper. So I know some of you have dinghy sailing backgrounds, some of you have other backgrounds in that sense. But Kitty, I'm going to start with you. What was it that really sparked that love of the water?
Well, I've been sailing since I was 5. And that was sort of through a family friend. And we went to a lake and I started sailing. And I think partly with dinghy sailing, it's the fact that everything you do has an immediate reaction. If you want something to happen and you move the boat slightly, the whole boat will move, and it's up to you. So I was on a topper and it was just me out there. So I sort of had to trust myself. It was only on a lake, so it didn't feel like much could go wrong. But you learn to trust yourself and you learn actually what you're doing. And I loved it, and I loved all sorts of water sport. And then my scout leader suggested I went on one of the Tall Ships voyages because he is a mate for Tall Ships, because he knew I did a bit of dinghy sailing. And part of what I loved about Tall Ships was the community, the fact that from the moment you join the boat, your watch leaders, your mates, your skippers, they will always want you to learn and enjoy it. It's about learning and youth development, but about having fun. Because if you don't enjoy it, you're not going to have those other elements that come with it. And then I loved the first voyage. There was no part of it that I felt that I didn't enjoy. So other people you're sailing as well, you work with them really closely and you get to know them so quickly. Then that's partly what I loved. And coming back to second year, we went to the Channel Isles, so it was a bit further than the sailing. We went on a night sail our first evening. And it was kind of, you were thrown in at the deep end and we had 3-4 hours sleep, which was fun. And that's kind of the attitude that I had about it. Quite a few people were seasick and quite a few people didn't enjoy it too much. But why shouldn't you enjoy it? You're out sailing at 3 o'clock in the morning. We got to see the sunrise and it was just really good fun. So that's kind of why I love it. And it was also the other women. So I've always had the same watch leader. Both voyages I did, and she was female, and that was always really nice because it felt like it was a possibility. A lot of the time it's quite easy to see industries that are male dominated and sort of think, oh well, it's unlikely that I'll get anywhere in that. But actually having a female watch leader showed me straight away that I could move up and I could sort of Adrian, if they want to jump in with their spark,
Lucy, go for it. Mine is a little bit different. So I'm not from a sailing family at all. I grew up in Germany in the Black Forest, so about as far as you can get from the sea. But I was a big reader as a teenager, and I read Swallows and Amazons, and that was literally the first thing. And if people don't know it, there are some very strong female characters in that. Nancy Blackett being the pirate sort of thing, and I just loved the idea of adventure. And my parents sort of picked up on that and then started encouraging me to do some sailing. The other thing that was at that time was I think my parents bought me the book of Maiden going around the world, which is the first all-female team. And I don't think I've ever felt there was anything I couldn't do. It was a very supportive environment at home. So that's how my inspiration started.
With that, actually, to follow it, so a lot of us have been inspired at some point. So for Kirsty, talking about the watch leaders that show you that actually seeing someone like you in a role that is possible makes it possible for you. But Lucy, you're talking about Maiden. When it goes thinking about women who really inspires you, what do you think about the journey they went on that to get to that point, that first female crew sailing around the world, the amount of pressure they were under, the amount of press they had? So those of you may remember the amount of press that the crew got, and from start to finish, it was almost the press were willing them to fail, and they had to fight twice as hard to get anywhere. But for you, what do you think life was like for them going through that?
Well, for them, must have been incredibly hard. Yeah, as I say, thankfully, I think things had already changed a bit by the time I sort of started. So there were, on the boats I started sailing on, there were women in leadership positions. So there was a female mate, I think, when I first did the tall ships race. And not only was she very confident, and it was clearly obvious that she knew exactly what she was doing, but she was also great fun. And really approachable, and I really like that. I think what Kitty said as well, the sort of feelings of community within sail training. I think there have been quite a few. There's been trailblazers. There's one lady who was the bosun on the schooners, Jane Willoughby. And it may seem like a really, really small thing, but one thing that when I was thinking about, what inspired me to this, was at the end of a voyage, they were saying bye-bye to everyone, and she just said to me, "Oh, we'll see you again." I thought, "Oh, right, you'll see me again. Well, in that case, I better stand up to that and come back." And I don't even know if she realizes what an impact that had, just such a small thing. So just being encouraging, I think can have a huge impact.
Ironically, I think the thing that stands out to Jane Willoughby, she was probably about 5'2", 5'3", really long plaits, and always in a Maersk boiler suit. I don't know whether she ever worked for Maersk, but she, there's just formidable character in a small stature, but absolutely formidable. But I think for following on from Jane, there was I'm just going to jump in, but the two captains at the time. So us having grown up in the sail training world back in the late 90s and early 2000s, we were starting to see women. So is Captain Barbara Campbell, who was on the Queen's Honours list. I think she was on the just before the Queen passed. I think she was on the last Queen's Honours list. And then another captain called Claire Couples. So where we've all had experiences where we've seen women in responsibility positions. So seeing Maiden go around the world and just thundering through the negativity that potentially suggests they might not be able to do it, to then see two female captains of great big tall ships competing in a world where they are really the minority. But you never know it. There was nothing about them that suggested that they couldn't do it. And actually, Barbara, you would have the experience with Barbara as well.
So those two ladies for me really, really showed me a lot of options around there in terms of merchant navy. So I started working at ship in 2000, and I didn't have anything to prove in 2000 because these phenomenal ladies had already been through and done that in the 80s and 90s. So by the time I started going away to sea in 2000, all of those boundaries had been reached, and there weren't many of us, but it certainly wasn't unusual for female cadets to be around. And those two ladies were just so inspirational. And the challenges that they must have faced going into that industry in the 90s, when quite often ships never ever have had a female in any capacity on board them. The pressures just must have been absolutely immense, but they didn't just survive and manage, they absolutely thrived. And it's certainly what I've seen with my cohort that have gone through is actually what you tend to find is the females that start their career and stick with the career are actually the people who do really, really well. So my cohort, there's another 2 female captains out of about 7 of us that trained that year who are still at sea. One in a really, really tough world of tankers, another one who's moved across in city vessels. Red Funnel now, about a quarter of their captains are female. There's more and more of us out there, and it's not just the deck side. A very good friend of mine is chief engineer on board Sir Dave Lattimore in the Royal Research Ship. And Geraldine started her journey as a trainee with Tall Ships Youth Trust. Kirsty, who works with us as captain, started her journey with Tall Ships Youth Trust. I don't think I've ever come across another female at sea whose life hasn't been changed by this organisation. Everyone I've come across at sea has had their lives and the direction of travel their lives changed fundamentally because of this amazing organisation.
And building up like Joe, these women who have been the trailblazers, yes, they had lots of pressure. Get it? These women who are the trailblazers, yeah, they had lots of pressure, but they also, the ones that came afterwards, the ones that continue their legacy, I find them hugely inspirational as well. So we have 23% of our skippers at Tall Ships Youth Trust are women, which I think is amazing as a budding, well, hopefully one day skipper. You'll be looking up to them and seeing these women in an authoritative position going, I can be like you, and working with these women. Sue at the back, we've already mentioned her, but she's worked her way up through the ranks from cook to mate to skipper, and
now trains the skippers.
And now trains the skippers, and that's what I want to do. And having that almost a role model to follow is hugely inspirational. Sue was also partially what got me into big boat sailing. So my mum competed the Fastnet in 2015 as part of an all-female team, and Sue was the mate on board and got my mum back into sailing. And I came on board after that because I was like, I want to be like them.
And I was speaking on Maiden as well a little bit. I didn't read the book, but I watched the documentary about and was massively inspired by the all-female team. I was actually on an all-female team, a race team out in Australia a few years ago, and we faced our challenges there from sort of catcalling to wolf whistling and all of that, and actually we did really well in the race series. But it was really good to see Maiden. I was really inspired by Tracy Edwards, and then I signed up to do this Ocean Globe race, the Around the World race, which took about 7.5 months. And then a few months later, it was announced that Maiden were in it. And that was like the biggest news to me, such an inspiration. And obviously I got to know the girls, the new team really, really well. And they faced a lot of difficulties actually, especially in the last leg. They had issues with their water maker and their generator and things like that. And we all thought they were going to drop out. That would be sort of the not the reasonable thing, but it would be fair if they did actually pull out and go to the Azores or whatever. But they didn't. They managed to find workarounds and pushed on, and they actually ended up winning the race, which was, that's history making. And obviously for them, there was a British female skipper, so that's the first British female skipper to win an Around the World yacht race, and they had people from all different backgrounds as well, very disadvantaged backgrounds. So that was very inspiring and inspirational to see that.
Don't mind losing against a crew.
I know, but I'm not confident to win. Thanks, Mum.
Cheers, thanks, Mum. It's quite interesting because that leads really nicely on to it's the perception of so challenges for women in maritime. It's a real mixture of different things over the years. Obviously, like modern world, women it's in terms of the world of equality and equity, it's quite important to mention both. But the perceptions of women in maritime, the perception of women in sailing, so whether you're in commercial seafarer or you're yacht racing out here, it's quite interesting that there's a couple of days ago there was a women's helms race. There's a Women's Day, and so it's that kind of that need for recognition. For us, I think Charlotte's already mentioned. So as part of our team, we have it's 23% of our skippers and mates are female. Global, it's just under 2% of seafarers, so active offshore seafarers are women. So we are significantly bucking that trend with that. In terms of our volunteers, it's well over 60%. And in terms of our young voyage crew, so people who are coming in from the age of 12 and above, we're almost 50-50. So this opportunities are there in creating those. But I asked Joan initially, How has perception of that changed? So in terms of you in the industry over the time that you've been in it?
So there are no boundaries, but that doesn't mean we're getting it right. So I sailed with female cadets, I've sailed with other female officers, but what we're not doing is managing to attract enough people. So still, if you go aboard a commercial ship, the tankers and things going into porting the bigger ships, seldom will they still have a female on board. I was extremely fortunate in my career with a very lucky break that took me to British Antarctic Survey. And on those ships, you have half the complement of the scientific staff, and the scientific staff had always been the pretty much 50-50 split. So on board those ships, the ship's crews have been working with female scientists for a decade or so before I got there. But what you still tend to find is that the females that stay at sea very much end up in certain industries. So passenger vessels have got a far higher concentration because it's a far more equity environment to work in. Let's say wide length ferries, red funnel ferries have got high representation. It's when you go back to the commercial that we're just still not getting it. We're just still not getting the attraction to draw people through into an industry where there really are no barriers. I was never treated any differently on board a ship as a female cadet to my male counterparts. When I got my first command, the only question the crew had when I got on board was, what do we call you? Because the captain's always been called the old man. And I said, the greatest compliment you can call me is to call me the old man, because that's a term endearment for your captain. The greatest favour you can ever do. And that's all the crew were worried about. There were no questions about anything else to do with being the first female captain at any of them ever come across. But it was just, what on earth do we call you? But it's other parts of the industry that we're still struggling. I've just recruited our first apprentice into the Conservancy in Chichester on a small commercial vessel apprenticeship. We pushed far and wide to get that advertised, and we didn't have a single female applicant for that apprenticeship. In Harbour Authority, with a female harbour master and a good mix amongst the team, we just didn't get a single female expressing an interest in an amazing opportunity. So it's trying to change perceptions, and what this organisation does is opens people's eyes and shows them opportunities are out there. So how does that compare to the sort of sail training world, Lexi?
Yes, I mean, I think you've already said, and I think you're right, actually, that the sail training sector, perhaps because it is so welcoming, there's far more women involved in that than there is. This actually reminds me of not that long ago, somebody asked me to not mention that the skipper was a woman because that would imply it's unusual. So they said, please don't put in the press release, oh, look, our skipper's a woman, because that kind of implies it's not normal. So now they just say our skipper, Holly, has been doing it for 15 years. And I quite like that. So maybe we've moved beyond that. But I think that's definitely, as you say, is noticeable in certain sectors that are just very welcoming, and perhaps it's the atmosphere on board. And thankfully, I don't think I ever had issues. And when I started, when I was sort of 22, 23, I worked for the Challenge business at the time, so the previous owners of your vessels. And they did quite challenging things, and they did fast net races, and they did transatlantics. And only once or twice did we, most of the customers were adults that were middle-aged men, sort of in their 40s, in possibly quite successful positions ashore. And once or twice somebody said, oh, you're quite tough, aren't you, for a girl of 23? But mostly I think they realised that I knew what I was doing, and they were out of their comfort zone, and this was my boat and I knew what I was doing. So thankfully I never really had anyone thinking I couldn't do it. Within sail training, I don't know the numbers now, but certainly at one point all of the biggest vessels were captained by women. So Royalist, which is the Sea Cadet square-rig vessel, has a female captain. I think Johanna Lincretia, which is another large vessel down in the West Country. Prolific, which is another large vessel here in Solent. They're all of them have had women captains. There's nobody bats an eye. I'm trying to remember what else we wanted to. What was the
difference for these guys, actually.
Yeah.
So Kirsty and Charlotte are starting out, really.
And how's it? Have you had any issues, or is there just no question?
My first voyage, we had 2 girls and 8 boys as the voyage crew. And the only difference was who was in a cabin with who, and our cabin smelled really bad.
Nice.
Yeah, because it was 2 boys and 3 girls in one room, and some of them didn't shower. But it was never a problem from a sort of perspective of the skipper or mate. We did the same jobs as the boys did. We were expected to sort of learn in the same way and join in the same way, and it wasn't like a problem. And that's kind of what is nice to see. And it's almost something that you shouldn't have to think about at all. It's just, these are our crew, and this is how they're going to learn. This is what they're going to learn about. We're aiming to youth development, and that's what we want to get out of the week. That's kind of my view on it.
Right, so that follows on quite nice from what Lucy was saying about sort of neutralising those comments, that actually we don't need to flag it as well done, there's a woman at the helm. Actually, we're crew, and we have a skipper and a mate, and this is, the boat's off and it's going off to do youth development. And shower.
I mean, it's very, very rare that, anything that comes up to do with, like, challenging gender. Why I competed in the Fastnet Youth Crew on one of the challenges last year, and we were a 50-50 split of boys and girls. In fact, our skipper mate and one of our watch leaders were all female, which was pretty awesome for those of us who were looking to step up into those roles and say, actually, if you could skipper in those wins and make it through that race, then that girls could do anything, really. Occasionally you get some people of a certain generation. Thankfully, none of our tall ships staff. We do get some people in marinas going, "Oh, do you tell people you lost?" And you go, "Actually, that's my boat," and I'm proud of that. I'm a watch leader on that boat, and I'm confident in what I do, and having the confidence to challenge that assumption that you just wandered in by mistake. I've only forgot that from tall ships.
It's interesting that one of our other skippers, Sophie, so Sophie's had it a number of times where she's come into a port and somebody from a marina has come up to the boat and said, "Oh, can I speak to the skipper, please?" And she's like, "I am the skipper." And then they kind of go, "Oh, okay." And then they'll start talking. Or an instance where she was packing her bag the other day and she was trying to, if anybody's ever had a barrel bag, when you're trying to pack your kit into it, it's like a suitcase. You basically have to lie on it. It's the only way the zip's ever going to do it. And she was rolling it on the pontoon, lying across it, trying to do the zip up. And somebody walked past and said, "Oh, we should have brought the hairdryers and the straighteners with her." Oh, she was great though. She turned around and went, "Oh no, we don't do sexism like that on this pontoon, do we?" And she just tackled it straight ahead on. But thankfully, those sorts of things don't happen. But very occasionally, going into a marina, you might get a passing comment from somebody. But what's quite nice is actually we're in an environment where you can confidently challenge that to say that's not okay. We don't do that.
I have to say, when I joined my first ship, I joined up in Scotland, and I was a tanker, and but my companies are British companies, so it's all British seafarers. They're really rangers sometimes, but there's like one other girl on board out of 80, 90 people. We generally have larger crews. Sometimes there's more, there's 50 even on board. But I do remember when I joined my first ship, no idea what was going on. I just dropped my bags off my cabin and was marched down to the forecastle and told, "Right, stand there, just watch what's happening. Don't get involved, just have a look." And one guy shouted at me that I shouldn't be there, I should be doing his laundry. So we brought us off to a great start. But actually, not even by the end of the trip, but sort of halfway through the trip, and I worked with him more and more, and he got to respect me more, not just because of the rank situation, but just getting involved. And being more used to having women around, we got along really well, and I highly doubt that he'll be doing that again. Other women that go out board. Just having female presence on board is sometimes all they need, because it's unusual. They're not happening. So
it's challenging the perception, and then some people it's challenging generations worth of the faith discussed around a dinner table or wherever. It's challenging that vision of actually we are people. Absolutely. Well, we make up a significant part of the population, and like Joe was saying earlier, in terms of the opportunities, there are barriers to it. It's deception generally. It leads nicely into opportunities. So a big part of some of the work that we're doing is making sure we're creating pathways for young women and actually our young people collectively, actually. So to follow on from Kitty's comments, and creating those opportunities for training, for recognition, for visibility, wherever you've come from, whoever you happen to be. And actually out of the panel that we have here, India, Kitty and Charlotte and I went to the International Maritime Organization, which is part of the UN. In May, they have a day which recognises it's the International Day for Women in Maritime. And on that particular day, they had something like 700 delegates from over 100 countries. So these are all significant dignitaries from around the world. And we got to join their symposium talking about safety at sea. So rather than thinking like life buoys and safety lines and things like that, it was actually talking about the welfare of women as seafarers, and actually raising awareness of things. Back to basics of, if you're on an offshore vessel, there are enough immersion suits on board for everybody on board. But if you happen to be a petite female, so potentially sort of 5'4", size 6, size 8, the immersion suit is more likely to do some damage to you if you try and get into it. They are designed for the average height, the average size men. So even the safety kit that's kept on board vessels isn't necessarily designed for a variety of physical shapes, and that applies to both male and female. But it was interesting that I'd never thought about it from that perspective. But for Charlotte, why are events like that? So it's brilliant, we've kept to go to, but why are events like that so important?
Well, I mean, it shows that women have a presence and that we have a voice and that we are confident in saying, actually, we're concerned about this safety. And particularly as a young woman starting out in the maritime industry, seeing all these inspirational people. For example, some of the panellists on the conversation, they had done some absolutely amazing things. And looking up to them and being like, well, if you have the confidence to step up and say this, and the confidence to say this in front of a massively crowded room, like there were no free seats, and that they could talk about it with such passion as well, that actually, again, that we can do anything we set our hearts to. And having the opportunity to network with these people, particularly
It's Hiker. Hiker Megan, she's the head of the Marine Environment Division, I believe, at IMO.
Yeah.
Yep.
But she, we got to speak to her privately as part of the group, and that was amazing. And she said that some of the best people come out from being mentored by somebody in a higher rank. And so she was saying how they do mentoring programs at the ILO and things like that. And actually, it's something I would have never have known about. And having that opportunity to go and to listen and to learn as well, it really puts things in perspective and shows that there's more things out there in the maritime industry than you could ever imagine. What about you, India and Kitty? How did you find it?
Yeah, I mean, see, I've had a lot of opportunities with tall ships. They really gave me the confidence to look at careers at sea, and now we see more and more women entering the industry, which is really good. And saw a huge difference between my phase 1 back in early 2020, just before COVID, and then phase 5, which was the end of 2022 for me. Huge change in female cadets, which is really, really good to see. And yeah, on board, there's no real difference in opportunities between the male and the female cadets. And actually, we try not to. Again, it's like women in maritime. A day when we don't have to be talking about women in maritime is the day that we've won. Because it's not just about that; it's about equal opportunities. And I've had, very good experience on the whole. And with change, actually on one of my ships, there was a committee for not just women to talk about things they wanted to change, so men could go as well. And it was really nice to see things being talked about and then action afterwards, and small changes on ship, which not just helped us out, but helped some men as well. And and
Yeah, I think the opportunities that tour trips give are kind of not what you expect. Like you first go on a voyage and say, okay, I'll go away for a week, and then maybe I'll come back next year, and maybe I'll come back the year after. I'll see if I like it. But actually going to London and going to the IMA was so interesting, and it was really interesting seeing how the fact it impacts so many people. Because obviously women are 50% of the population, but within sailing, there's such a smaller percentage of people who've ever seen bearers. And it's really interesting to see that actually everyone's going to be affected by it. And for all people to get into it, you need to start making change, and for change to actually happen. Because talking about change is good, yeah, but for change to happen, then people will want to join the maritime industry and want to be a part of it.
I think it was quite interesting to see actually just how varied the roles were, because even talking to one of the ladies that you connected with India was the marketing and comms lady. So it was just looking at how they were promoting themselves. So India's done lots of work with podcasts and prolific on TikTok in terms of the journey of a seafarer and what that looks like, and using social media as a tool to really raise the profile, but actually then being able to connect with the marketing side of things and looking at that side of maritime. So you have to go to sea to get involved with things like this. It can be finance, it could be HR, it can be literally anything. So that was particularly good. Yeah.
And the main point they really had home was that change is coming, but as young women, we really have to almost drive that change. Like, we can't just sit by and let things happen, let boats slowly pass us by. Like, we have to be there and be present and be the ones to challenge these things. For example, the dry suits, immersion suits, and say, well, actually, why can't we have suits that make us safe as well?
It's interesting from that. We've started to find certainly brands are removing female sizing from regular sailing brands that you see along the high street here in Cowes. They've removed the female sizing, so it's now going to generic, small, medium, large. And for any woman that has hips or chest, the sizing, it's awkward. So if you're suddenly going to unisex sizing, it doesn't work. So particularly if you happen to be slightly smaller, or maybe 5'6", suddenly the bottom of your salopets get destroyed just from walking around the boat. So yeah, it's interesting to look at how brands are changing what they're supplying. But even that needs to be addressed as well.
Yeah.
But from a positive, go on.
Oh, sorry, no, I was just jumping. I was just going to add a thing about you said there's other opportunities that don't have to be seafaring opportunities. A thing I wanted to add is what I found is you can also combine the two. So if you did go to sea, but then you wanted to have a family, let's say, that's obviously very difficult if you go to sea, but there's plenty of jobs ashore, and there's so many. So I was a skipper for about 10 years, and then I came ashore and ran a charity. And yes, it was a sailing charity, so there was a lot of overlap. But there was an awful lot I did not know about running a charity. But from being a skipper, you learn decision-making, you learn leadership, you learn teamwork, bringing people with you, you learn budgeting. There's so many things that are transferable skills that you can use in other jobs ashore. So I know plenty of women who started off as seafarers. Now one is working for the hydrographic office, for example, because she's familiar with all the charting and that kind of, that was her route in. Somebody's working for the Prince's Trust, which is a youth charity. So that was her route in through the sail training or the youth work. Somebody's become a teacher. So there's plenty of things you can do, even if, let's say you go to sea for 10 years or so and then decide it's time to have a family or come ashore. So don't be put off by that.
That was literally my journey.
There you go. Yeah.
There are every people who managed to quite. So I know a captain who still works for Dover Calais Ferries who has 2 children and has managed to maintain a career at sea. Red Funnel, one of their captains, just returned to work after maternity leave, and she will continue to work at sea. So the two things used to be entirely separate from each other, but there are now routes and pathways and work patterns that the two don't need to be exclusive. There are females out there doing exceedingly well in their profession whilst also juggling and managing to have something.
That's a massive change. Just when 20 years ago, when my daughter arrived, I lost my career at sea. and I retrained, came ashore and became a teacher. And then ironically, the waters are clearly in the blood because she now works full time for Clipper and is absolutely exhausted after the epic weekend they've just had over in Norfolk. But yeah, so the sailing, and she started out with sail training and youth development back when she was 12. The second she was able to get on board the ship, she did. Became a volunteer at 16 and was working full time in maritime by 18, which is amazing. So yeah, it's a very proud mum moment.